So let me tell you a story. How did I get into the field of psychology? As a kid, I was always kind of an odd kid. Even though most kids like cartoons, and I did too, one of the things that I liked as a kid was horror movies. Not many people like horror movies at that age, but I was always drawn to them. And as a kid, one of my favorite horror movies was that of The Shining. If you've ever seen it, based on a story by Stephen King, The Shining tells a story about a family that is living inside of a hotel for a long period of time, and the father of the family starts to lose the mind as time progresses, as time goes by. Fantastic movie to watch if you haven't seen it, by the way. But when I was a kid, I remember seeing that movie and thinking, why does that guy lose the mind? Why does he lose his mind? And that's kind of what got me into the field of psychology. As I was going through high school and I was approaching my time in college, I was always aware that I would be drawn to this field. So when I went to college, it was no second thoughts. Right away I knew that I wanted to study psychology. So I come into the first class in my Introduction to Psychology lecture as an undergrad student. And I remember that I was very interested in thinking, am I going to learn how to read minds? Am I going to learn right away how to give therapy? I was thinking of, classes being that way. So as my time in college progressed, I was kind of thrown off a bit because I had an idea for what was psychology, but what I was encountering was something very different. Very technical, something quite statistical in nature, something that was quite objective, something that was even at times kind of complicated to understand. Why? The thing is, psychology overall can be divided as the study of behavior and mental processes, but one thing that we forget about often that we should emphasize is that psychology is not only that, but I should emphasize that psychology is the scientific study of behavior and mental processes. When we throw in the word scientific implies that we follow the scientific method. The thing is, the study of behavior and mental processes can be very subjective. And when something is subjective, it may be biased, it may be inaccurate. So we try to, in our field, follow the scientific method to ensure that any question that we have on behavior and mental processes can be answered objectively, can be answered hopefully accurately. And the scientific process, I don't know about you, but when I was perhaps a high school student, middle school student, when I thought of the word science, I associated science with chemistry, people in a white coat working inside of a lab, dropping like chemicals one on top of the other. I was thinking of biology. I was thinking of people also with their white coats and gloves, opening up, dissecting animals. But it's not unique to that. Psychology is actually a scientific field. And there's actually quite a criticism on the field because psychology is often placed in the liberal arts department. When it's not an art, it's actually a science. So what does that imply? Is that we follow the scientific method. The scientific method is a series of 5 steps that we take to try to make sure that any question that we have can be answered objectively. So let's put up like this really quick example, right? Say that, the quarantine is over. At the time that I recorded this, we're still in the middle of the quarantine. The quarantine is over, the clubs open up. You decide to celebrate by going out to a club to have fun. You're single at this time, so when you're there, you're trying to see if you can make some eye contact, to see if you can meet someone new on this day. You're free. Enjoy it. But turns out that you're not being quite successful this day. As much as you try to make your eye contact, as much as you try to get approached by someone, or as much as you try to approach someone, zero, nada. So you wonder what's going on with you because your friend is getting here like all the drinks invited, your friend over here is getting all the phone numbers, and you're wondering what's going on with me, why am I not getting anything when my friend over here is getting everything? So in your mind, you notice that there's one stark difference between you and your friend. You're wearing like a brown shirt, and your friend over here is wearing a red shirt. So you wonder, I wonder if the red color would make you more attractive than the brown color. By doing that, you're already in step one. You're asking a question. The step of the question implies that it must be something that you can actually test. So it's a question that can actually be tested, and the more specific you can be with the question, the better. So the question shifts to the hypothesis. A hypothesis is a statement. A hypothesis is a guess and is phrased as a sentence. The difference between the question and the hypothesis, you take off the question mark. So before you were saying, I wonder if the brown color makes you more attractive. I'm sorry, opposite. I wonder if the red color makes you more attractive than the brown color. Now when you shift this into a sentence, you say, the red color will make you more attractive than the brown color. Congrats. Now you have moved up to the second step where you're now taking a guess, and that's a hypothesis. The third step would be then now to test it. You can find a multitude of ways to try to test it. In a way to try to test it, for example, you can think of yourself going out to the club the next day, taking a notepad with you, and trying to see how many instances are people getting approached when they are wearing a brown shirt or when they are wearing a red shirt. That could be one thing. Or maybe you yourself can test it on different days. Go one day, some days on the brown shirt, some day on a red shirt, and see what are going to be the differences. Or you can collect a group of people. A group of people are going to be wearing red shirts. A group of people are going to be wearing brown shirts. See how they interact and take data of that. A series of different ways. Now, from the third step, you move into your conclusion when you're going to say, so see, I was right. The red color seems to make you more attractive than the brown color. You don't just get to keep the conclusion to yourself. You actually want to share it with your peers. So informally, this would be putting it up on Facebook. Hey, guess what? The red color works. Let's everybody do it. Or you can put up on Instagram a nice picture. You can upload it to your Snapchat. You can make a video about it on TikTok. I don't know what you guys are doing with social media these days. Quick thing about this, again, the scientific method sounds intimidating, but it shouldn't be. It's just a series of steps that you take. And the series of steps that you take are what is trying to ensure that our field not only remains relevant, but also that our field is trying to give fair answers to how is it that we behave and how is it that we think. There's a criticism in the field that sometimes our field gets too technical, sometimes the field gets too concerned to try to understand this, and we kind of forget how this can be used to help, how this can be used to improve life. Those conversations are going to be then tackled a little bit more, as the course that you're taking goes by. I strive to try to make my lessons applicable to real life. So you learn a little bit more about that, but as a couple last things to wrap up this topic, in the test scenario, there can be different ways that you can test a scenario. You can observe, you can find data and try to establish association, what you call a correlation. You can take surveys, but you can interview people. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do, but the most common way in psychology is to experiment. In an experiment, you try to control all the other factors to specifically narrow it down to one thing that is of your interest. I'm going to put up here a mental note. Remember, the thing that is of your interest, that's what you call the dependent variable. The dependent variable is the thing that you're trying to understand. But to further understand how this is impacted by one factor at a time, that one factor that you try to manipulate to see how it affects here, that one that you manipulate is your independent variable. So it's actually very simple. With an experiment, you try to control everything in the surroundings, specifically to have an interest in one single thing, which is your dependent variable. And in the best way to measure this, to really test for my interest, I'm gonna take one other factor and I'm gonna manipulate it, and that would be your independent variable. It takes a little bit of practice, but it becomes easier as time progresses, time goes by. Now, last thing to wrap up this video, a replication is not really a step in the scientific process, but it's very, very important. Replication in this field, or in the scientific field overall, means repetition. Repetition means that you try to repeat the same hypothesis, but with a different set of subjects, with a different set of participants, with a different set of people, because if you have a hypothesis and you test it, there could be the chance that you find results by accident. And we don't want that. We want results that didn't happen by accident, but that are actually there. That is a reality, it's an effect. So a replication implies that you repeat the study. And when you repeat the study, you ensure that the results, the outcome, are fair. So replication means repetition. If I go through my whole steps and I check in my study that the red color makes it more attractive than the brown color, I do want to repeat the study over and over again so I can then conclude and say, yes, the red color makes it more attractive than the brown color. And guess what? Actually, research in psychology supports this idea. So if you want to find yourself more attractive, especially if it's on a first date, use the red color. It actually works. So that's my gift to you. Thank you for paying attention. Good work.